We gaan beginnen.
All right. Let's see if these subtitles want to kick in now when we are actually talking. It works. So welcome everybody. As you can see, we're running another experiment. In this case, I'm clicking on something in the stuff from PowerPoint that generates automatic subtitles. So if that screws up, my bad. But well, great to not see you, but to have so many people here again today, and also great to be back. So I hope you enjoyed last episode with Robin, and it's also great to do it again together. I can see there's almost 100 people tuned in, and I think that's quite amazing if you see what technology can actually do. And last weekend, I was teaching my mother how to use Zoom and video chat, and she actually had quite a hard time wrapping her head around it. And then I explained that there would be so many people dialing in to listen to Value Stream today, and she had a hard time wrapping her head around it. But you gotta love her, and frankly, she was one of the toughest students I ever had in my classes, and that's probably because you can negotiate with students. And I'm not sure, I can see Robin recognizes that. It's kind of difficult to recognize. Is the same with you?
Definitely. Negotiating with family members is much more difficult for sure, especially mothers or mothers-in-law.
Absolutely. Let me. All right. I've just opened the chat. Chat, is the sound better now? Click, clack, click, clack, click.
I think it was maybe the sound of the movie up front.
Ah, that makes sense.
Or at least
I may have.
Now is perfect.
All right, cool. All right, let's get started. Hey, so in this episode, we want to talk about negotiation. Right, Robin?
Yes, indeed. So let's get started.
Yeah. Let me find the right slide to click on. There we are.
All right, so there's a lot of different things you could consider to be part of negotiation or to be a negotiation setting. For example, think about asking for a raise. Think about maybe crossing the street even. How's that a negotiation? Or think about raising your kids. How's that for a negotiation setting? So if you imagine being in maybe one of these or another negotiation setting, how is it that we typically deal with a negotiation setting? And please share some of your ideas via the chat. How do you deal with a negotiation setting? What is some common stuff that you do or say maybe? All right, some ideas coming in. Try to cover both people's interests, asking open-ended questions, ask what the other party wants from you, and say what you want. Makes sense as well. Trying to understand where people come from, so understanding their ideas, their perspectives, that makes sense as well. Again, what the other person wants, their situation. Try to understand other points of view. Yeah, so there's a lot of also trying to understand what the other person wants, and listening to what the other person has to say, what they value, what they're looking for, what their goals and objectives are. Also from Debbie, mirroring, showing some empathy. That makes a lot of sense. All right, good ideas, a lot of good ideas coming in. And actually there's maybe one thing that we definitely should not do, Chris.
Yeah.
Right? And probably there's one thing that you should never do, which is splitting the difference. And it's actually something quite common that we do all the time in negotiation settings. So is there something we can do about that?
Yeah.
And I think it is, right? So if you can show the first item.
Yep.
So a couple of things that you could think about. So don't try to split the difference. Don't try to, if one person says, I'm going to pay 100 euros for that, and the other says it's going to be 50, just end up in the middle with 75, and basically letting both people be dissatisfied with the result. And that's typically what you see happening in negotiation settings. So if you want to be a more effective negotiator, there's a couple of things that you can do. And we took a lot of inspiration from this awesome book here, Never Split the Difference, from Chris Voss. So definitely a recommended read. We'll show you the link to the book later on as well. And there's a couple of things this ex-FBI hostage negotiator talks about. And one of them is indeed building a connection.
Yeah, because you can imagine if you're negotiating for the FBI and there's a hostage negotiation, splitting the difference would mean the negotiators get half of the money and you get half of the dead hostages, which is pretty bad solution.
Pretty painful. Not the best result. So there's a couple of things he talks about, and we'll get into each of them. First one, create a connection. The second one is more about persuasion and actually using, in this case, the hostage taker to think for you. So ask them tough questions and make them actually think about potential solutions to get out of this hostage situation. And it's kind of crazy, the scenarios he talks about and how he basically enables the hostage taker to kind of talk himself out of these situations. So there's some cool stuff in there as well. And there's another one, which is talking about the so-called F word. And this one still contains 4 letters, but it's about fair and not the other typical F word we hear about. And the fair deals word, or fair deals, is more about bending people's reality, giving them the illusion of control, and offering fair deals. And we'll take a look at each of these parts, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I was researching this, and then I recognized a lot of the concepts actually from the empathy map. And as product managers, you know the empathy map. It's something we use, well, maybe not every day, but quite frequently to create this image of what our customer is, who he is, what they want, what they feel, what kind of fears they have. You're really trying to get into the feelings of the customers and trying to solve their problems rather than just selling them your solution. And a great story that always triggers me was the story of Kodak, how they sold the first photo cameras, particularly to young mothers, with the message, how awful would it be to forget these first steps that your baby takes or the first words that they make. Well, maybe you can't capture words on a photo, but you have this mental image of forgetting these magic moments. And using Kodak, you can actually capture this. And that's a great way to play into the needs of your customer. And I thought, well, maybe that's very similar to what you actually do when you're trying to do negotiation. I remembered when I opened this talk, I talked about my mother. Most of you will have a mother, I presume, and most of you will recognize what I described. So I try to build a connection on something that's common. And that's one of the key things that you can do to create this connection between people. Now, another thing that is extremely powerful, which I kind of learned from this book, and then practiced in real life, and it actually works, is mirroring. And mirroring in the sense that you not only mirror the physical stance. So if somebody has a closed posture, you can also make a closed posture, or you can force somebody open by maintaining an open posture. But by copying each other's behavior, like mirroring physical behavior, you create this connection of, hey, we understand each other, we are the same. And it does create a kind of relaxation for both parties.
Relaxation for both parties, Chris?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm struggling now with the English word. So it sort of creates this tranquil atmosphere. So it slows things down, and that's fruitful if you want to have a negotiation. Rather than us both being very locked in our stance, we create this more open atmosphere in which we communicate. What is also is important is not just the physical stance, but also the vocal stance. So we repeat a lot of work. So what Robin just did, he
I'm
mirrored.
glad that you recognize it.
Yeah, and I'm just now it sort of starts to drop. What he did is he picked up on a keyword that I was uttering, and then repeated it. And unconsciously, I went along with his conversation. I thought, Robin is a great guy because he knows exactly what I'm talking about. And by that, he created a connection. Now, you can use the exact word. You can also use this technique to sort of remove the negative emotion from it. For example, if you work with somebody and they say, it's a great product, but it's too expensive. You could repeat, expensive. But that's not really the mindset you want to enforce. You could also say, I feel that price is really important to you. Or I need it quicker. I can see we have a timing problem. But it's kind of difficult. And sometimes you label emotions wrong. So a couple of things you could do is start a sentence with, I'm sorry. Now, I'm not a guy that usually says I'm sorry a lot, but it can help you to already make an excuse for something that may go wrong. So you could use something like, I'm sorry if I misunderstood, but it seems that you're unhappy about, or I'm sensing some hesitation. Is that correct? So you're labeling their emotions, their behavior, but you're still keeping some bandwidth for in case you're wrong.
And what seems to be really important is the word "it seems." So it seems that you're angry, or it seems that you're disappointed, or it seems that you're actually happy. Instead of saying, "Hey, you're happy," or "you're bad," "you're sad,"
Not
or
happy.
"you're angry," that will trigger people going into a basically a fight in response. While "it seems" is basically more something that would revoke a conversation and sharing of ideas.
Absolutely. Seems you're right. So one of the things that we, when we get this disconnect, it's usually because we mislabeled the emotion, or it has another context for the other person. And I put a picture up, which is too small for you to read. But if you Google the wheel of emotions, you will find this image. And basically what it does, it will help you, especially as a non-native speaker, as myself. It will help you to expand your vocabulary. So if you say, it seems like you're angry, well, there's many forms of angry. It could be the feeling of being let down, or maybe you felt betrayed or resentful. And those are words that better match the emotion that somebody may be feeling at that point. So this use it seems, and try to label the emotion. Now, another thing, who's listening to late night radio still? Is that something people still do? I used to listen to late night radio when I was studying, but then that was before the internet. All right, you had this late night radio, and these DJs had this particular voice. So it was like a deep, soft, slow, it was kind of a reassuring voice. And it didn't sound this agitated or aggressive. And sort of you went along with the flow. And that's also something you may want to spend some time on, thinking about, how do I sound? What kind of voice am I using? Is that something people recognize? If you recognize it, you can write it in the chat. Ono seems to recognize it. Maybe we can just use a small experiment while we're at it. I don't think we have time for each and every one of them. Robin, do you have a preference on what we want to do?
Just show them on the screen. I think this one is a typical product management case, right? So let's imagine that your development team comes up to you and basically says, well, we need a couple of extra days to finish the product or the increment. As it is now, there's no way to ship it. So what would be like a first response you would, as a product owner of this team, how would you respond to the situation? And you don't have to make it a half-hour epistle, but what would be like the first thing you would say or do or ask or whatever it is? How would you respond to this case? Again.
Yeah, maybe you should read them out loud because they're directed to most of them are directed to the panelists. So there's stuff like, what is the biggest problem? Or why do you feel we can't ship this? What is the minimum effort that we need to do in order to ship it? Mariana, thanks for letting me know, which is nice. It's already building a connection. What is the cause and how sure are you that we can't ship at the moment? Again. My initial response would be Scrum Guide says no.
Just ship now. All right. Yeah, so some interesting responses. I think there's of course a lot of different ways of dealing with this, and Chris will share some tips in a minute. I think one thing to be careful with is to ask. That's kind of interesting because in a lot of trainings we always talk about ask people why 5 times, and the interesting thing in negotiation settings is that why is actually something that you want to avoid, because why is kind of offensive in a sense, and it might trigger people to actually become more angry or upset or whatever it is that they're feeling. But why seems to be something that you actually want to avoid. And there's a couple of different ways that you can kind of work around that, right, Chris?
Yeah, I was just building a phrase in my head, but well, what I would probably do is, I'm sorry, Robin, but I don't really understand what you mean by that. Why wouldn't the why not work? Now I'm asking you for why, but I'm not asking for why, and I'm sort of explaining that I don't understand it. So that'd be one way to probably ask for why without asking why.
Indeed.
So be careful with that. I've been known to ask why. That doesn't really help.
Not in all cases.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, let's quickly move on.
Yeah. So Persuasion, and I think best known man for Persuasion is probably Winston Churchill. Great diplomat, but also somebody who managed to get his way. And I think that's the interesting part. How do we get to yes? How do we convince the other party to actually go with what we want? And there's a couple of techniques that you could think about, and the 2 most popular ones, or the 2 that I like best, is how am I supposed to do that? That's a great phrase that you can use when you're stuck somewhere. Like, for example, the question that you got about, hey, we can't release the product. Well, it's kind of an issue because I promised some stuff to the market or to other people, and now I'm stuck. So how am I supposed to solve that? Making the development team part of the solution, or start thinking about helping me rather than pushing their own agenda at that point. And another technique that I use a lot is what I call the balance, the magical balance, or the Jedi mind trick, but that's not the official term. But one of the things that I like to do is, okay, so we're not shipping at that date, okay? But if we're not shipping on that date, what could go wrong? And now the development team has to think about things that could go wrong by not shipping in time. Well, we could lose the faith of the investors, or we get into troubles with stakeholders, or And we might not learn fast enough about things that are actually working or not valuable, or we're actually delaying all kinds of integration problems so they become bigger. The actual content is not really that interesting. The interesting part is that now the development team is using their brain to come up with arguments why their idea is bad. And it also works in the other way. So if the scale starts to tip and they say, oh, actually, we should do this, you can say, this is great. So if we're going to do this, what other great things would happen, or what else would we gain? And that's also a great technique that helps you to build arguments for your case. Again, now the people you're negotiating with are generating ideas on why this is such a good idea. And because they are generating the arguments, it's their idea. And that's much more powerful than me giving them arguments. So they're doing the work, but they're working for me.
And that's what Chris in his book, so not the Chris on call here, but Chris Voss in his book also describes, and to really use the brain power of those hostage takers to eventually come up with just walking out the building and letting all the hostages go without doing anyone harm. And so there's a lot of powerful stories in this book as well, where eventually, hostage takers want $1 million and they end up just paying $1,500 and giving them a Snickers because that's the last thing that they can do. I see that the translator made the money a bit more than I was talking about, though. Basically, using their brain power can unlock a lot of solutions that they would then also support.
Yeah. I strongly recall that I was working at TomTom. We had a guy coming up who worked in one of our stores, and he came up to product management and said, I want to be a product manager. And my boss sat down with him and said, look, okay, that's interesting because it's a great profession. But do you have any experience in product management? He's like, no, zero. Okay, do you have any kind of education in product? No, zero. Okay, so that's not going to fly, boy. And he kept just pushing on, saying, I'm really passionate about this. I want to work in product management. I know what you guys do, and I really want to be part of it. And at some point, my boss said, well, at least you need to know what the customer thinks and does, and what kind of pains they experience. So go at least spend some time at customer support. And with that, he went off. And after 2 months, he came back and said, look, I just spent 2 months at customer support answering calls. And I learned so much about customers. So what's the next step? And it was brilliant because he kept bugging until he got something that he could use. And there was actually no other opportunity than actually give him something as a junior product PM. And he was a great PM because he had this hunger, and he had this experience at customer support that really helped him understand what customers want a lot better than maybe we did with our education. All right. So sometimes you're on the other end and you're being convinced or not convinced, and you want to buy time, or you can see that the discussion is not going where you want to go. And then there's some helpful phrases on the right side that can help you to buy time or slow down the conversation. So as long as we're still in the conversation, there's opportunity to negotiate and come up with a different solution. So maybe some of those sentences will work for you. Yeah. I want to move on because we still have a couple more slides that I want to cover. And I also want to have some feedback from you. If I'm talking to you and I'm trying to negotiate with you, how can I tell that I've persuaded you? Let's see how he translates that. Translation is better than my pronunciation. So what word am I looking for? Can you type the word in the chat? The word yes could be. Body and face expression. Yeah, so I asked my son, are you going to do your homework today? And he said, yes. Nodding, yeah. So that's something with body language as well. Acknowledgement, yeah. Agreed or come point, yeah. those are powerful phrases, but the word that Chris mentions, and maybe shouldn't make it into a guessing game, but he talks about "that's right." I'm not sure how it translates into other languages, but I do know the feeling or the emotion that's evoked when I pronounce it myself. When I'm negotiating with Robin and I tell him, "Yeah, that's okay," or "Yes, I'll do that," and you're right.
You're right, Chris.
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah, sure.
Deal. But if I say that's right, it sort of means that universally for me, this means the right thing. It's true. It's the truth. And that is typically the point that you're looking for.
As you wish.
As you wish, my lord. Yeah. Yeah. If you can get that level of obedience from your development team, you're that never happened. All right, let's move on. Another word is the F word, the fair word. And I was Googling it, and the first one that popped up was Claude Juncker, who explained about the Brexit deal. And we should stop negotiating because we've been doing it for 4 years. This is a fair deal. Anyone in their right mind trying to change this deal is being unfair. And you don't want to be unfair. That would be a bad thing. So this is a very nice way how you could sort of use the magic of the F word. If you say this is a fair deal, the other guy has to prove that it's not fair. And that's something we may not want to do. Now, some other tips is anchor the emotions. And Chris wrote a great example that I actually used in one of when I tried to sell some training to a company, and basically said, look, I have a lousy deal for you. But it's kind of a unique thing, and I wanted to give it to you because you're such a great customer of us. And rather than giving it to somebody else, I wanted you to be the first to know this. That sort of is an interesting one because it's now no longer about price and what you're getting. It's about losing to some other guy. And that's a powerful emotion that plays back into the fear. Another one is about price, for example, price ranges. I can give a range of price somewhere between 60 and 110K. Now, if we're now going for 60, you feel cheap. Well, maybe that's a fair price. I don't know. So by giving them a range, people tend to move to the middle of the range rather than to the extreme low end.
This one is especially powerful in salary negotiations, right?
Yeah.
Well, people at other companies in product management, they get paid somewhere between 95 and 115K.
Yeah, it depends a bit on their experience. I mean, if they have a couple of years experience, they're probably a bit higher on the scale than lower. And now the other party really has to go out of their way to say, but actually in our company, this is a 40K job. Interesting. What makes you, it seems like you're far outside normal ranges. How did that happen? Anyway, and another way to think about it is how numbers are presented. So if you go up, it feels different than going down. And I've put down this extreme arithmetic expression. So 8 times 7 times 6 times 5 times blah, blah, blah. It feels more at first glance than 1 times 2 times 3 times 4. And that's because our brain reads the first few digits and then sort of extrapolates. And so that's also a trick you can think about. Non-monetary items are cool. I got a great offer from a colleague of mine who said, Chris, I'm based in Indonesia and I really want you to do a product owner training. And, it's Indonesia, so it's probably a lousy deal because he played all these tricks on me and I didn't notice. It's probably a lousy deal. It's probably not as much money as you're normally going to make because we're poor. And so, but it is really close to Bali. And you get your flight expense and you're in the neighborhood. And I'll take you around and give you some real traditional Indonesian food. Knowing that you do martial arts, I can even introduce you to my Pencak Silat training. I would have done that training for free at that point. Because he punched in some odd numbers, some non-monetary items that really were important to me. And I had a great time. Didn't make a lot of money, but had a great time. I'd love to go back. So it was a fair deal. So Robin, I struggled a bit with the 3 tips that you should do today because that's our traditional ending. But I think look out for the things that we talked about. So think about labeling emotions, what you're going to do, and about odd things and things. What I'll put the slides up so you can find the books that you want to read to. But there's something else because it's all about non-monetary things and great fair deals.
Yeah, so we have a lousy deal for you.
Yeah, absolutely. But you're gonna love it.
But you're gonna love it anyway. So if you book a training via Xebia Academy, then you'll get this awesome non-monetary goodie bag coming with it. And although the picture shows some items, we're not too sure what other stuff is gonna be ending up in there. But it's gonna be huge. We're gonna make America great.
No, that's gone.
Great.
After today, we don't need to do that anymore. The joke has passed.
All right.
No, but basically what we wanted to do is give you something back to the community. And I can't give you the training for free, but we can give you something else from the value stream. So enjoy. That's it for today.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing everyone again next week. Have a great day, and thank you for joining.
Yeah. See you around. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this episode, move on to the next one, or
join us or follow us on Medium and LinkedIn to get inspired with even more content.
Or come to our training.